Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookercast, the podcast where books come to life.
And I'm so excited to dive into another amazing story with all of you.
Whether you're a bookworm or just love a good story, this is the place for you.
Every episode, we explore incredible books, talk about their stories and characters, and share insights that'll make you fall in love with reading all over again.
All right, let's not keep you waiting any longer. Get comfortable, and let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
All right, so get ready, because today we are diving deep into the world of Freida McFadden and her thriller, The Boyfriend.
Oh yeah, McFadden, she really knows how to, take something familiar, something like dating, and make it, well, terrifying. You know what I mean? Like, who hasn't had those anxieties about meeting someone new, especially online?
Totally. Like all those what-if fears you have when you're swiping on those dating apps, she takes those and just turns them into a nightmare, but a really, really good nightmare that you can't put down, you know? So for anyone out there who hasn't read The Boyfriend, let's just, set the scene. Picture this. New York City and our main character, Sydney, is trying to navigate the whole dating app thing.
Which, let's be real, is a lot of people these days. And that's what McFadden does so well, right? She grounds these crazy stories and experiences that we can all relate to. Like with Sydney, it all starts pretty normal, but then she goes on this date with Kevin. He seems okay at first, just from the app cinch.
Right, Kevin, he's like the typical bad date, at least at first. But things take a turn, don't they?
Oh, yeah. McFadden doesn't hold back. She starts peeling back the layers. And Kevin, well, let's just say he's not who he seems. He turns out to be, really aggressive. Dangerous, even. It's that classic thriller move. But McFadden uses it to make you feel how vulnerable Sydney is. And it makes you wonder if something like that could happen to you.
And just when it seems like things can't get any worse for Sydney, she meets, well, she calls him Mystery Man at first, but we learn his name is Tom. He swoops in and rescues her from this awful situation with Kevin.
Ah, yes. Tom. The knight in shining armor. Charming, handsome, rescuing the damsel in distress. But even from the beginning, there are these little hints that maybe, just maybe, Tom isn't exactly who he appears to be.
You get that feeling, right? Like, is this too good to be true? Is Sydney just, blinded by what she wants, a connection, or something else going on? It makes you think about that whole unreliable narrator thing, which McFadden is, a pro at using.
Oh, for sure. We're left wondering the whole time. Is what Sydney sees real? Or is Tom manipulating her? I mean, she's been through stuff, so is she misreading things because of that? Or is her gut right? Keeping you guessing, that's the key to a good thriller, and McFadden knows how to do it.
And just when you think you're starting to figure Tom out, McFadden throws in this whole other timeline. Takes us back to Tom in high school.
Now, this is where things get really interesting. We meet Daisy, his high school sweetheart, and we get these glimpses into his family life, which, well, wasn't so great, especially with his dad.
The way McFadden weaves these flashbacks into the present story is just so smart, you know? Each flashback adds another piece to the puzzle of who Tom is. And it makes you wonder how those past events might connect to what he's doing now. Kind of like, those true crime documentaries, where they trace a serial killer's life back to their childhood. You're searching for those clues, but every time you think you find one, it just leads to more questions.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole technique so effective in psychological thrillers, right? It's like you peel back one layer and there's another one underneath. You never know what you're going to find. It keeps you on the edge of your seat, wondering if Tom is like a product of his past or if he's choosing to be the bad guy.
But it doesn't stop there. Then Sydney's friend Bonnie is murdered.
Right. Bonnie's murder. That changes everything. It makes everything feel more dangerous, more real. And suddenly we have another mystery to solve. Who killed Bonnie? At first you think maybe it's Randy, Bonnie's boyfriend. Bonnie seemed kind of scared of him before she died. So it just adds another layer to the whole who can you trust question.
Like McFadden is constantly messing with our expectations. Just when you think you have it figured out, bam, another twist, and then another body is found. This time it's Allison, someone from Tom's past.
Talk about a tangled web. It's like the past and present are crashing into each other, like those crime boards they have with the photos and the red string connecting everything. That's what this feels like, except the string just keeps getting longer and more tangled. McFadden does a great job using these seemingly random events to create this overall feeling of mystery and like a creeping sense of dread.
And on top of all that, Sydney starts noticing that things aren't adding up with Tom's stories. He's acting stranger too, and that just makes her suspicions grow even stronger.
Exactly. And here we go again with that unreliable narrator thing. Is Sydney just overthinking things? Or are these red flags that she needs to pay attention to? It's that internal struggle, trying to decide whether to trust your gut or not. Anyone who's ever been in a bad relationship, they know exactly what that feels like.
It really makes you wonder, how well can we ever really know another person? Especially when you consider the impact of past trauma, which is another big theme that McFadden explores.
Yeah.
But before we go there, I think we need to take a closer look at some of the main characters in this whole crazy story. We've talked about Sydney and Tom, but what about the others?
Well, there's Gretchen. She's Sydney's friend, super bubbly and supportive. But as the story goes on, we learn that she has her own secrets. And like Tom, she's connected to the past in a way that's, well, kind of disturbing.
Gretchen is the perfect example of how McFadden makes you think one thing and then completely flips it around. At first, she seems like a good friend, someone Sydney can rely on. But the more we learn, the more we realize that she's playing her own game. She's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, you know?
Totally. And then there's Randy, Bonnie's boyfriend. Remember how we talked about him earlier? At first, he seems super suspicious, which adds to the whole paranoia vibe of the book. But Randy's story, it's more complicated than it first seems.
McFadden is the queen of keeping us guessing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You think you have a character figured out, and then boom, she throws in a twist that changes everything. It's like she's saying, don't get too comfortable, things are about to get wild.
Oh, yeah. And that's what makes her writing so good. She builds these characters that seem simple, but they have all these hidden depths. You're always on edge, waiting to see what they'll do next.
It's brilliant. And I think it's time to really dig into these characters and their motivations. Because, let's be honest, The Boyfriend is all about the psychology of these relationships and how easily people can be manipulated.
I agree. Let's figure out what makes them tick, like how do their past experiences affect their choices? Because to solve this mystery, we need to understand why these characters do what they do.
Okay, so let's start with Sydney.
So Sydney, right? Where were we with her? Oh yeah, she's stuck in this whole mess trying to figure out what's real and what's not. What do you think is driving her? Like, what does she really want? And how does that play into, that whole trust thing that McFadden keeps bringing up?
That's a really good question. I mean, on the surface, it seems pretty simple. She's looking for love, like a real connection with someone, and maybe even, a bit of that fairy tale romance. But McFadden, she doesn't stop there, right? She gives Sydney this medical condition, von Willebrand's disease. It's a bleeding disorder, and it makes things a lot more complicated for her.
It's so interesting how McFadden uses that, the physical vulnerability, to kind of mirror what's going on with Sydney emotionally. It makes her seem more real, more human. Like, we all have our weak spots, right? Things we're insecure about. And for Sydney, having this condition just makes those things even bigger.
Exactly. And it makes you want to root for her even more, knowing she's dealing with all of that on top of trying to figure out who she can trust. And that's the thing, right? Because of her condition, Sydney has to be more careful, more aware of the risks, both physically and emotionally.
Totally. She can't just jump into things without thinking. And that makes her more sensitive to those red flags, the warning signs that other people might miss. Remember when she met Kevin, she knew right away that something wasn't right.
Right. It's like her vulnerability. It makes her more intuitive, more perceptive. But it also makes her a target for someone like Tom, someone who seems to be everything she needs. He's protective, and he seems to understand her condition.
Exactly. At first, Tom seems like the answer to all her problems. He's the opposite of Kevin. He's charming, he pays attention, and he even seems to care about her condition. But then we start to see those flashbacks to his past, and things get a lot more complicated.
Oh yeah, those flashbacks are so important. They show us that Tom was abused by his father. He was bullied, tormented. It's really sad. And it makes you think about how much of his behavior now is because of what happened to him back then.
And that's one of the things I love about McFadden's writing. She doesn't just create these black and white characters, good guys and bad guys. It's not that simple. Tom is a perfect example. His past explains why he might be manipulative, why he needs to be in control, but it doesn't excuse his actions.
It makes you think about the cycle of abuse. How often do people who were hurt end up hurting others? It's a dark thought, but it adds this whole other layer to the story. It makes us think about how even people who've been through bad things can still make bad choices.
And it makes you ask, how much can we blame Tom for what he does? Is it all because of his past? Or is he making his own choices? McFadden doesn't give us easy answers, and that's what makes it so interesting to think about.
It's not a simple situation, right? There's a lot of gray area. And it makes us look at our own beliefs and try to understand what shapes a person's actions. Okay, but let's talk about Gretchen for a minute. Where does she fit into all of this?
Gretchen. She's fascinating. She's all about appearances, about how things look on the surface. At first, she seems like the perfect friend. She's there for Sydney, always happy and supportive. But then we start to see the cracks, and we realize that there's something else going on beneath that cheerful act.
It's like she's hiding something,
Yeah.
right? She's totally a wolf in sheep's clothing. As the story unfolds, we learn that she's been connected to Tom for a long time, and all those things she did that seemed innocent, they were all part of their plan.
Exactly. And the way McFadden slowly reveals Gretchen's true nature, it keeps you guessing. It makes you wonder who else might be lying, who else has a secret. It's like that saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But McFadden takes it to a whole new level.
Totally. It makes you think about times in your own life when someone you trusted betrayed you. That feeling of realizing that someone you thought was on your side was actually working against you the whole time, it's awful.
It's heartbreaking, and McFadden captures that feeling perfectly. But wait, what about Randy? Remember him? Bonnie's boyfriend, the one who seemed so suspicious at first. Where does he fit into all of this?
Oh man, Randy. He's a great example of how McFadden keeps us guessing. At the beginning, he totally seems like the killer. He's got a reason, he's acting weird, and Bonnie was afraid of him. But as the story goes on, we realize that Randy, like the other characters, is more than meets the eye.
Yeah, he gets caught up in Tom and Gretchen's game, which just adds to the whole paranoia thing. McFadden uses Randy to show how anyone can be manipulated, how anyone can become part of something they don't understand. He's another piece of the puzzle that makes you question everything.
She's always changing things up, keeping us off balance. You think you know what's going on, and then bam, something new happens.
Yeah.
This brings us to, like, the best part of The Boyfriend. Those big moments, the shocking reveals that make it so hard to put down.
Oh yeah, there are so many. But I think the one that really gets you is when we find out who Tom really is and how he is connected to the murders. It changes everything. Suddenly, everything we thought we knew about him is different.
It's a total shock. You realize that all those nice things he did, those charming moments, they were all part of his plan. It's like McFadden just punches you in the gut, but in a good way.
It's not just about the shock, though, right? It's about how it makes you feel. It makes you realize that someone can be manipulating you without you even knowing it. It's scary because it could happen to anyone.
It reminds you that the people you think you can trust, the ones who seem the most harmless, they can be the most dangerous. And we can't forget about Gretchen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Finding out about her and what she's really like and how she's working with Tom, that was a big one too.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That was a total jaw-dropper. It changes everything about how you see the relationship, and it makes you realize that Sydney has been surrounded by liars this whole time. She's all alone, and it makes her seem even more vulnerable.
McFadden is so good at creating these characters that are complicated. They're not just bad guys. They have their own reasons for doing what they do, even if those reasons are messed up.
And that's what makes them so creepy. Because it reminds us that the bad guys in real life, they don't always look like villains. They can seem like normal people, which makes their actions even scarier.
Exactly. You never really know who to trust. And then there's that final confrontation, with Sydney, Tom, and Gretchen. And then Randy shows up, which no one expected. What a wild ride.
That whole ending, that's where everything comes together. All the storylines, all the clues, it all leads up to that. And McFadden doesn't disappoint. It's a crazy ending, and it makes you think about right and wrong, about what happens when someone betrays you, and about how strong people can be even after going through something terrible.
It's so intense, you can't stop reading until you know how it ends. And it's not just about the twists and turns, it's about Sydney's journey. She starts out trusting, hopeful, and then she's betrayed and lied to, but in the end, she finds the strength to fight back.
It's a powerful message. Like, no matter how bad things get, you can always find a way to get out, to protect yourself. And you can heal. But before we get too deep into all of that, let's talk about how McFadden writes. What do you think makes her book so good for people who love thrillers?
Well, she knows how to keep the story moving, that's for sure. The pace is fast, and you're hooked from the very beginning. She knows when to make things intense, when to throw in a surprise, and when to let the silence, speak for itself.
It's like she's composing music, but with suspense, She plays with our emotions, keeps us guessing, and you find yourself holding your breath, just waiting for something to happen. And when it does, it's like, wow.
Okay, so we've covered a lot about the characters, right? And all those twists and turns that make The Boyfriend such a gripping read. But I think it's time to zoom out a bit. What is it about this story, about Freida McFadden's writing in general, that really grabs readers, especially now? Like, what makes it so relevant?
You hit the nail on the head. One thing that strikes me about McFadden's thrillers is how she captures this really specific kind of fear. It's not like the supernatural or anything. It's the fear of the everyday, the things that seem normal, ordinary. That's where she finds the terror.
Right. It's not ghosts or monsters. It's the darkness that hides in plain sight. The people you see every day, the places you think are safe. That's what's truly scary.
Exactly. And she does this without, like, tons of violence or gore. It's unsettling because it feels so real, so close to home, dating, friendships, family. She takes those normal things and twists them just enough to make you question everything.
Like she's reflecting our own anxieties back at us, those what-if thoughts that we try not to think about. She brings those to life.
And speaking of modern anxieties, it's interesting how she uses technology in her stories, you know? Dating apps, social media, the whole online world, those things can be used for good or bad. It's a reflection of how we live now, for sure. Technology is everywhere, and McFadden uses that to create this feeling of unease, even paranoia. I mean, think about it. We meet people online, we build relationships online, we present ourselves online. It's easy to hide who you really are, and that makes it easy to deceive people. McFadden gets that.
Makes you think, right? Like, can you ever really know someone you meet online? Or are we all just putting on a show, hiding behind filters and perfect posts?
It's a question a lot of people are asking, especially with all the, bad stuff that happens online. McFadden explores that, how being so connected can actually make us feel more isolated, and how technology can be used to hurt people.
It's definitely creepy, but it's also so relevant to how we live now. Makes you think twice about all the time we spend online. But one thing McFadden is really good at is pacing and suspense. She knows how to keep you on the edge of your seat, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. She's the master of the slow burn. The tension builds slowly, little by little. She drops these hints, these clues, and you're always trying to guess what's going to happen. It's like a puzzle you can't put down.
It's like she's playing with us, right? She makes you feel safe for a minute, and then boom, another twist. The game changes completely.
And her writing style is so sharp, so engaging. It's easy to read, but it's also super addictive. You just want to keep turning the pages, You need to know what happens, even if you're kind of scared to find out.
It's that perfect mix of wanting to know and being afraid of what you might find out. It's what makes her book so hard to put down. So to bring it back to what we were talking about before, what do you think is the main reason people love McFadden's books? Why are they so popular?
I think it comes down to this. She taps into those fears we all have, the ones we don't like to talk about. Being lied to, betrayed, taken advantage of, those are fears that everyone has, no matter who you are or where you're from.
It's like she's speaking to those anxieties that we try to ignore. The fear of trusting the wrong person, of not seeing the bad stuff coming.
Exactly. And McFadden explores those fears in a way that's scary, but also kind of relieving. It's like she's saying, hey, it's okay to be afraid of this stuff. It's normal.
It reminds us that we're not alone in feeling those things, and that even when things are dark, connecting with other people can help. But it's not all bad, right? I mean, even though her books are scary, I think there's also a message of hope in them. Like, even when things are really messed up, we can still find a way to survive, to heal, to get away from bad situations.
Totally. And that's what makes McFadden's books so powerful. They remind us that we're stronger than we think and that there's always a way out, even when it seems impossible.
So to wrap up our deep dive into The Boyfriend, what's the one thing you hope people take away from this?
What makes this book and all of McFadden's work so great is that it makes you think. It makes you question things, look deeper, and never just assume that someone is trustworthy. It reminds us that the world is complicated and sometimes scary, but it's also full of stories that can teach us things, even if those stories are a little bit messed up.
That's a great way to put it. So if you haven't read The Boyfriend yet, go check it out. It's a seriously good thriller, and it'll stick with you long after you finish it.
And if you love psychological thrillers, Freida McFadden is an author you need to read. Her books will keep you guessing, they'll make you question everything, and they'll definitely leave you feeling a little bit uneasy, which, is kind of the point of a good thriller.
Exactly. And that's what makes her so good at what she does. So that's it for our deep dive into The Boyfriend. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a whole new world of books.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of BookerCast. We hope you enjoyed diving into it as much as we did. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on this episode.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this episode with your fellow book lovers. And let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. See you in the next deep dive. Bye for now, and happy reading.